sir.
All right, welcome everyone. This is the online meeting of the Signal Mountain Town Council. It's Monday, August 10th, a couple minutes after 4 p.m. And we will begin with a pledge. It's gone well sometimes it hasn't. We should all mute our audio, and Sam will give us a flag and we'll be back after that. Is there anyone designated for an invocation tonight? So I don't see any note that anyone has. Okay, well, so we'll have a moment of silence after the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. Wait for Boyd and Carol to return. Hello, Harry Cash.
Dan, how are you?
All right, we're glad.
How's everybody?
We're all good. Knew you had a meeting right up until 4 o'clock.
Right.
Okay, so now it's time for citizens' opportunity to address the council.
You want to
Sam,
do roll call first?
Oh yeah, thank you.
Roll call
Get the
minutes.
agenda up here. Roll call. Sorry.
Vice Mayor Bill Lusk.
Here.
Councilmember Cheryl Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Susanna Murdoch.
You must be muted, Susanna.
Here.
Mayor Dan Landrum.
Here.
Thank you.
Now it's time for citizens' opportunity to address council. And I think we have more than normal, which is great. We have 5 people on the line. And Sam, if you'll go ahead and bring the first, or are we doing video or phone?
The first one is coming by video, and this is Mr. Jim Collins. I'll bring him in right now.
So for those, none of us have attended a council meeting in a while. Just a quick update: the citizens' opportunity to address the council isn't a conversation. It's just what it says it is. It's the opportunity to address the council. So if you pose hypothetical questions and you don't get answers, it's not because we're sitting there like knots on a log. It's because that's the way this part of the meeting is designed. So if you can bring Mr. Collins in. There he is. Hi, Mr. Collins. Could you hear me leading up to this? I think he's looking for his mute button. I think you're still muted, Mr. Collins. Can you hear me? So, I see you're nodding your head. We still don't hear you yet. So somewhere you've got a button that says unmute.
And I'm not showing an option to unmute him.
Are you on a...
He's on.
Well, he has to unmute it first, and then still not there. Mr. Collins, if you're like me, now's the time where you call a grandchild. Help find it. Is it working? Are you on an iPad by any chance? Or a computer?
He's on an iPad.
So on an iPad, let me look and see if I can see on Zoom where that might be.
Very sorry, Mr. Collins.
I'm pulling mine up to see if I can find the button for you. You can still hear me, right? Mr. Collins? Shake your head yes if you can hear me. I'm not sure he can hear me anymore. Mr. Collins, can you hear me? I think he's asking someone for help.
Okay.
Should we switch to someone else?
I was going to say, Mr. Collins, if you can hear us, I'm going to bring someone else in, and I'll try to give you a call real quick.
Yeah, do give him a call because he may not be hearing us at all.
Okay. Our next person is George Davenport. I'll bring him in at this time.
Is George not video?
George is.
So George, your mic is still muted and we don't have video.
It always takes just a moment for them to connect.
There it goes.
Can you hear us, Mr. Davenport?
I hear you.
All right, we hear you too, so we have success.
And y'all excuse me. I'm going to try to get with Mr. Collins just in case I'm still with him. But when you're ready to move to the next person, I'll be back
Sure.
with you.
Mr. Davenport, were you able to hear us when you were in the waiting room?
No.
Okay, sorry about that. We weren't sure how that worked on that side. So this is your time. It's your 3 minutes. It's not really a conversation. If you ask hypothetical questions, it's not that we don't want to answer you, but it's structured as an opportunity for citizens to address council. So state your name and address, and then the time is yours.
George Davenport. I live on 327 Creekshire. My phone's 886-7173 if anyone's interested. I wanted to, I guess, ask about 3 questions. But first of all, I'm very disturbed at the conditions that we seem to be encountering. I don't understand why this was deemed to be necessary or appropriate. C.E. James was my great uncle, and of course he's the scion of that part of the family, but that's not nearly as important as what I think he meant to this mountain. And what I'd like to know is, why are we doing this? And what do we expect to accomplish by doing anything other than saying, yes, that's the way it was? Our heritage is what it is. If we deny it, then we have no heritage. And I think that's a bad idea. And I guess that's all I really wanted to say is I think that you all need to consider the people in this community, what they're proud of. And that doesn't mean that they should go around knocking anybody else for any reason. And think about what will happen if you do something like this to all of the people who take pride in Signal Mountain and its heritage. And that's really all I had to say.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Davenport, and we will absolutely consider your words. Thank you for calling, and I know it's not always an automatic, easy thing to do to participate in these kinds of things, and we appreciate you and your comments, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Sam, can you pull up another caller?
Absolutely. Our next caller is Aaron Goddard. Bringing Miss Goddard in at this time. And we're going to try to get Mr. Collins through his phone.
Oh, that's probably better.
But I'm going to see if that works better.
Hi, Miss Goddard, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. So
Great.
I understand that you couldn't hear in the waiting room. So
No.
this is a citizen's opportunity to address council. So it's not really a conversation. So if you ask questions and you don't get answers, it's not because we can't hear you, but this is your time to address the council. So state your name and address, and then the next 3 minutes after that will be yours.
Okay. My name is Erin Goddard, and I live at 612 Carolina Avenue. And thank you for the opportunity to address the council today. I know that you're going to be discussing the C.E. James Monument a little bit later, and I had a few thoughts I wanted to share, and I hope you'll forgive me for reading from some notes that I made for myself instead of speaking extemporaneously. I do better with notes. So my family and I have been following the coverage of Mr. Veal's research and the subsequent public response with a lot of interest. My immediate family, for those of you who don't know us, is many things. We are numerous. There are 7 of us. We're musical. Many of you will have seen my oldest son playing percussion in the marching band. We're avid readers, and we are also multiracial. That last one isn't the thing that defines us, but it is an important part of who we are. And it's unfortunately distinct in this town that as of the last census, is over 98% white. Now, I don't know of anyone who is claiming that relocating Mr. James's monument will suddenly right any historical biases or wrongdoings. And similarly, I don't know anyone who holds people living today responsible for the prejudicial laws or mandates of the past with which they had no part. Monuments are symbols and history is unchangeable. What we do have power over is what we learn from our history and how we decide to let it shape our present and influence our future. If a symbol communicates that we're not willing to see the fullness of history in all of its complexity, then it's incumbent on us, I believe, to rethink what symbols we want to represent us. Just as my family is not defined by any one part of our identity, neither should we allow any one element of our history, namely discriminatory deed practices, to continue to so steeply influence the makeup of our town. I believe that symbols and actions can be partners in creating a future in which everyone who wants to be a part of this community can do so fully and freely. Does our community value the maintenance of an unexamined past over the well-being of current and future residents, ourselves included? I hope not. So I hope that we look to the past and present with boldness and honesty and make choices that move us in the direction we intend to go and not allow ourselves to be stagnant or unimaginative in who we can be. And I'm not presuming to make recommendations about how to move forward on this, but I think it would be a tragically lost opportunity to not hash this out together. So I think what I'm asking you this afternoon as town council is to be proactive in organizing us as a community, as a town, in having these long overdue conversations, in educating ourselves and in planning so that we can be a place and a people that we can all be proud to be. And that is what I wanted to say. Thank you. And thank you for your service to town on council.
Thank you, Ms. Goddard. You're appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, Sam. Oh, that was the timer ending. She was very good with her time, wasn't she?
Was.
I got to figure out how to stop it. Stop it. Okay. All right, you have another caller lined up?
Well, I believe we may have Mr. Collins trying on the same device. Let me see if this works, and if not, we'll go to the next person.
Okay. It says it's an iPad, but he might have found the buttons. Oh, it says it's connecting to audio this time, so that's good.
Wonderful.
Hi, Mr. Collins. Can you hear us? All right. It still shows that you're muted. Can you unmute him, Sam, or does he need to do that?
Yes, I can unmute him.
So we're getting there. This is our end this time, Mr. Collins. Just give us just a moment.
Well, it's not allowing me to.
No.
Mr. Collins, is there a button to unmute?
There you got it.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. Okay.
We are very glad to hear your voice, sir.
I'm very glad to be here.
All right. So this is citizens' opportunity to address council. So state your name and address, and then the next 3 minutes belong to you.
Okay, my name is Jim Collins. The address is 331 James Boulevard.
So proceed.
Oh, okay. What I want to point out is that times are changing, and we all know that from watching TV and those sorts of things. But I'd very briefly like to give 53 years. That's how long I've been here. In 1966, we came to Chattanooga to teach at the University of Chattanooga at that time, now UTC. While looking for a house for the family, we were advised by many people to look in the Brainerd area. No, we liked Signal Mountain. People would say too far from town, just a bunch of old rundown houses. We bought our first house circa 1919 for $12,500. We know that's gone up a bit. After living here for a few months, I started to explore the area, driving out 127 towards Dunlap. Came upon a roadblock with men collecting money. Now that's not uncommon at the time. I think many people saw that for schools and other things like that. However, these men were dressed up in Klan outfits. I've never seen anything like that before. In all my years, I've never heard a negative word about C.J. James until it became fashionable to divide communities. In the early 1970s, while I was teaching at the university, we had a reception at my home for Dr. David Driscoll, a very important Black artist who was visiting the university at the time. The whole time he and our guests were at my home, there was a Signal Mountain police car outside on the street for the entire time. I believe it was Mr. Veal's father who was chief at the time. Sins of fathers. Signal Mountain aren't challenged anyway. Now you want to tear down the only piece of public ignorant. Chattanooga's coming around. They have the Bessie Smith Commission, which is being offered to Black artists only. Tearing down buildings is not a good idea. Tearing down sculpture is not a good idea. But the Chattanooga's trying to build something. They're building a commission piece of sculpture to honor Bessie Smith. If this, I suggest replacing it with a large bronze bus filled with Black maids inside. This is one of the sisters who came up in the morning, rode down in the evening after serving the elites for years gone by. That's my total statement. I think it's very unfortunate. It's very, very unfortunate. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. We appreciate your taking the time to do this and to write your words out. You are appreciated, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Sam.
Okay, we do have one other in the waiting room. We had another gentleman who has not called in. I do not see in the waiting room. So if you had contacted us and you have not called into the meeting yet, please do so as soon as possible. But otherwise, I will go ahead and bring in Claire Greisinger, who's our next. And I'm not 100% sure how Ms. Greisinger is coming in. I've got her on here in two different ways. So I guess we'll see how she responds.
I see the phone at the bottom and the iPad there.
Ms. Greisinger, can you hear us?
Well, if she's watching live, it'd be about 20 seconds behind. So if you see this, we're ready, whichever way you want to communicate, but you need to unmute. I really look forward to when we can be in the room together again. Hey, I think the phone number may be becoming active. Claire, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Claire. So same thing
You can't see me, can you?
No.
Oh, that's good, because I didn't get dressed up.
Okay.
All right.
Good. So you're same thing we've said to everyone, just as a reminder.
Right.
We've had more people tonight. This is
Right.
it's citizens' time to address council. So state your name and address, and then the next 3 minutes belong to you, and it's not a question and answer time. So if you ask hypotheticals, there's a chance they'll get answered later, but they won't get answered immediately. So
Right, I know the drill.
All right.
Claire Greisinger, 40 Carriage Hill, and I am going to pivot over, and I do think y'all have gotten emails from me on the James topic, because I would like to speak on the interconnection that I spoke about week before last, the water interconnection. So 2 weeks ago at that council meeting, I had asked for an update on the status of the interconnection, and I know that council staff is tired of my questions on this project, but I've been quite frustrated about the lack of information and progress, and it seems interest in getting this done. I looked back at some of the correspondence I've received from town council members and some staff since last summer. And so a little bit of that is I'm going to, talk about. 10 months ago, the council agreed to have a separate meeting with WRUD at our town hall, and council told me CTI and WRUD engineers were meeting and looking at all the options, and there would be a report, but that has never happened. Then 6 months ago, Signal Mountain WRUD did meet, and the council agreed that an interconnection would benefit both utility companies. And a vote was taken to move forward with an estimate. And so the meeting minutes of that meeting say that Mr. West from WRUD will provide the cost of the materials to install the 12-inch line down Miles Road. And it says that Signal Mountain will investigate the subsurface conditions, that's the rock, how deep the rock is on Miles Road. So the town staff, when they talked about they were going to do that, I was just so excited. I thought we were going to get something done. But 3 months later, a water department employee told me that there was, quote, zero agreement to one particular option for this project, that giving WRUD information on the rock depth doesn't help us, and this option hasn't been confirmed. At the same time, a council member told me we were going to investigate the cost of running a 12-inch line up Miles, as was voted on. This morning, I asked WRUD for that cost estimate for the water line, but they haven't had any communication from Signal Mountain, so they were not asked for any figures. So I hope the update that will come later in the meeting will provide the ratepayers with some information on this very long overdue project. So that is all I have to say. Thank you.
And thank you, Claire. Appreciate your call.
Bye.
Claire was spot on, 3 minutes. And a pro. Sam, were you able to get any of the other callers lined up?
No, sir. We had one more, Mr. Brad Case, but he has not joined us at this time. So if he's listening, and it's at the discretion of the council, but if you'd like me to try to reach out to him and bring him in at a later portion of the meeting, I can. Otherwise, we can move on.
If it was something on our part, I definitely would want to reach out to him. I mean, he may have chosen not to communicate, but we don't want to do anything to stop people from having an opportunity to speak. We want to make it as easy as we can so that they can. So if you don't mind, if the rest of the council's okay, but obviously we have a couple of resolutions to take a look at now. So if you can see what happens between now and when we finish that. But I would say once we get to the discussion, that probably wouldn't be an appropriate time. All right. Moving on to resolutions. We have two on the agenda tonight. The first is fairly simple. It's a resolution. Sam, if you could pull it up to the screen, please. Authorizing the purchase of radios for the police department, and I'll read the header. All right, this is a resolution authorizing the town manager to purchase mobile digital radios, Tennessee State Contract number 423 from Dalton Communications for an amount not to exceed $23,250 to be used by the police department for the town of Signal Mountain. So Boyd, if you want to give us any background on this, we'd appreciate that.
Sure. We have replaced the portable radios for the police in years past incrementally. This will replace the radios that are in the vehicles. Chief Williams worked with the radio shop that handles a lot of the communication infrastructure for this area, and they advised that this particular brand and model was much more affordable than what might be considered more of an industry standard with the Motorola. So he looked into that, found that they were suitable, and it turned out that they were also on a state contract, so that we could purchase them without having to bid it out, and ultimately be a lot less expensive than other options that we may have gone with. In addition to that, public safety equipment is one of the allowed uses for the direct appropriation grant from the state. So the full cost of this is budgeted to and will be covered by that grant, and those funds have been received from the state. So this purchase is covered by grant funds that are in hand.
All right, thank you. Can we entertain a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And any discussion? What happens to the old radio, Boyd? That's the question. Old radios, that's the question that always gets asked. Is there a market value?
It's possible. Most areas have gone to the newer generation radios, but we can look and see if there's a market there, or perhaps a small agency. We could make an intergovernmental donation to even, but we'll explore that after we get the units changed out.
Anybody have any other comments, questions? Carol, will you take a roll call vote, please?
I will. First off, I had Councilmember Graham as being the second on that motion. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Bill Lusk,
Yes.
Councilmember Cheryl Graham,
Yes.
Councilmember Susanna Murdoch,
Yes.
Mayor Dan Landrum.
Yes. All right, before we move on to the next agenda item, just Sam, put it back in the regular screen if you don't mind. We talked about this. I want to tell you guys how you can make it so you can see everyone. And would you guys like that now? So now that we're in the meeting, well, it went away. All right. The only way you can make it so everyone shows is when someone, that's where I saw it before, is when someone has a screen up. If someone is screen sharing, you get the option to see everyone on the right-hand side. So that may be the only time. All right, moving on to the next resolution. This is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Wright Brothers Construction Company for the repair and or paving of certain streets within the town in an amount not to exceed $500,000, and authorizing the town manager to execute any necessary documents in connection with this award. So a little backstory on this, and Boyd, I'm basically handing off to you, but we only got one bid, if I remember correctly, and it was higher than we expected. And there's also another minor item. It's not really a wrinkle that we may want to spend money on. So I think Loretta is available. Is that correct? Can we bring?
It should be if Sam can.
Sam, if you can bring Loretta into the meeting as well. And Boyd, if you'll take over now, that'd be great.
She should be coming in right now.
Yeah, you covered the basics on the bid itself. Went out and got one bidder, came in well above budget. Loretta's gone through and looked at what might be pulled from it, and ultimately has made a recommendation that we award the contract in the amount of $500,000. We have 400 budgeted. I asked her to communicate with the contractor, and it's our understanding that the plan would be, our plan that they agree with would be to break this up into two segments, get some of it done this paving season, being late summer, early fall, and then the remainder would be done in the spring. They understand that if we were to award this contract, that there is a possibility that we could pull some of these streets out if we do determine that that funding issues deem that necessary.
How does that work from a financial standpoint? How does it prorate?
Well, the bid, the process really allows that to happen because it's a unit price scenario, as it always is. So it's bid on the amount of work that's done, as well as the units of material that are used. So we're charged for the tons of asphalt or gravel or whatever. So it is unit pricing by design. So as we go through the project, we actually have somebody that's tracking. When they finish each road, we get all of the tickets, add those up, track it, make sure that we're staying in line with what we anticipated using for each road, therefore not getting out of bounds with the contract as a whole and end up owing more than anticipated. So we track that as we go, and we're billed by the unit. So if we were to pull certain streets from the contract towards the end, those units would not be delivered, thus we wouldn't be billed for them.
All right. Sam, if you don't mind, turn off the shared screen for now so we can, I think it's easier to communicate when we can see each other. One of the streets listed on the contract was Carolina Avenue, and I understand that Loretta has some ideas about how we might be able to make Carolina better for some residents who've been to the council multiple times throughout the years to say, is there any way we can make this part better? So Loretta, would you like to explain your proposal? I think you're muted.
Mute. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the end of Carolina has gotten in rough shape through all the heavy rains that we had earlier this year. And some people are having some real problems down there with the ends of their driveways washing out. And one issue we had down there was a lot of the pea gravel that was put in. A lot of that has over the years washed out. And what we thought we could do is go in and take out the rest of the bad material and prepare the road base in-house. And then when the paving gets done on the rest of Carolina and the rest of that area, then our contractor could come in and just do the paving portion. But we're having some really bad drainage problems down there at the end.
So this is a combination of a stormwater issue as well as just making the street good for residents. And I know folks have wanted it. This is not, and I think we need to be clear, the town is not proposing bringing this to road grade standard.
That's correct. We're basically just putting in a driveway to the end of that street.
No right of way is necessary for us to purchase or anything?
No, we have plenty of right of way. And we will not be working outside the right of way. We'll stay within the right of way.
Will we do all the engineering in-house for this?
Basically, there's not a lot to do. We have to just go in there, do the grading, grade the ditches out, and then just prepare a road base for a driveway. So there's really not a lot of engineering that needs to be done.
I guess I'm thinking about the stormwater side of it. What happens to the stormwater that we're going to be displacing?
Well, actually, we're going to be putting the stormwater back the way it used to be, basically, because now it has just, over the years, created lots of ruts, and then it starts finding its own path. So we're going to put it back the way it worked originally.
Do we anticipate any neighbors that would not, again, because it's not our road, right?
Right.
Do we anticipate any of those in the neighborhood being unhappy about this happening? And if so, what might those possibilities be?
I do not anticipate anybody being unhappy about us going out there and doing some work, helping with their driveway returns that are now washing out. Many of the residents have come out and spoken with us as we've been out there looking at it, and they would all welcome a better drainage system and driveway out there.
About estimate on the additional cost?
We can do the road base in-house. The asphalt portion will be just a little over $10,000 for that section. And the rest of Carolina and that area is already on our paving list. So the rest of Carolina will be being paved. The contractor will be right there. They'll just pave a little bit farther down the road if this happens.
Sounds like a win-win.
I think so. I hope.
Okay. I think, is there anything else that we need to hear before we entertain a motion, Boyd? I'm muting because a UPS delivery is coming into the room that I'm in.
Just to ask if Harry's got any input on this. I'll talk to him about it. As you mentioned, this has been an ongoing issue, and the town's position has been that it is a driveway area, and that we weren't responsible and required to do anything. But again, as Loretta said, we're now seeing where this is kind of a mix between a problem for the residents and stormwater issues that we can resolve by correcting the drainage in doing this. But ask Harry to give it some consideration as well.
At one time, there were discussions about the sale of some real estate on through Carolina. Was that at a standstill?
That didn't go through, correct?
Okay. Because I know that contractor at one time talked about, or there was some discussion about perhaps the contractor helping out there. Yeah, the position is that's an unopened right of way, and we want to assist, the town wants to assist those people to the extent possible by extending their driveways, essentially. And that's what this would be.
Right. Would anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Council
I
discussion.
thought I could wait you out, Cheryl.
I was waiting you out. I don't know. It worked either way.
All right, council discussion. Anybody have any other questions about this? Hopefully everyone will be a little happier down there. It'd be safer and better for bicycle riding and everything else. That's, I just moved out of that neighborhood. That is an amazing place to live. And this will just make it better for the people who live there. And that's great to get to be involved in that. So, well, I guess I do have a question. If it doesn't work, which I assume it's going to work, Loretta, that's what you guys do. But if it did create problems, during the year we patch asphalt, right? But
Yeah. Yes.
We're always talking whenever we had the discussion about working on this before, about how expensive it is to get a road bed brought to grade so that it can have asphalt laid on it. Is, since we're not bringing this to road standards, But we do anticipate that this will allow a fire truck to pull on it without worry and those kinds of things. It just won't be able to turn around.
Right, fire truck would be able to go to the end of the street. They would have to back out, and our garbage truck would also be able to go to the end of the street. They do have to back out of there, but both of those are our heaviest vehicles that the town owns, and this would allow those trucks to go down there.
All right, is council ready to vote? Carol, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Vice Mayor Bill Lusk,
Yes.
Councilmember Cheryl Graham,
Yes.
Councilmember Susanna Murnau,
Yes.
Mayor Dan Landrum.
Yes. All right, we move to.
Before we move on,
Mhm.
I believe Mr. Case has joined us, if you would
Oh.
like to try that.
Absolutely.
Let me go ahead and bring him in. It'll take just a moment.
Sure. If he's watching live, he may be
A little bit.
waiting for the lag. Mr. Case, if you're watching live, unmute your microphone. Is this a call in or a zoom in?
It's a zoom in.
He's in the room. Hey, here we go. Mr. Case, can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you. So thanks for participating. And just as we've said with everyone else, citizens' opportunity to address council is that. So after you state your name and address, the next 3 minutes belong to you. It's not really a conversation, but we need to hear what you want to share with us. So go ahead, please.
Well, I'm just kind of what happened.
You need to state your name and address, Mr. Case.
Okay, this is Brad Case, 906 James Boulevard, Signal Mountain, Tennessee. I was late getting in due to a little bit of confusion. First time I've ever even called in on this, or done the Zoom deal with y'all. But this monument thing really concerns me. I feel like that, my father was a general contractor and a developer for many years before he passed away. And I can remember as back as the early 1950s, what Mr. James did was really not done in any, it wasn't really against racial things or some kind of, at that time and period in our lives, that's the way things were done. There were racial, if you look back at the history of the racial clauses that were put in different areas, not just on Signal Mountain, but Red Bank, Catholics and Jews were excluded. You go to all different counties and cities all across this country, not just the South, the North too, did the same thing. Are we to erase all of this and every city and every town change their name, move all their monuments and do this? I don't think so. I have never, ever seen any kind of protest to the James Monument. I think somebody was just digging to be digging. And I would venture to say that you could dig around a lot more and you're going to find a lot more things that's like that would come up. So I just, and I put a little, I did it as a joke really up on Facebook. I said, well, if we're going to move that monument, maybe we ought to change the name of James Boulevard. Just simply because, if we don't want to be associated, have anything to do with Mr. James, then maybe we ought to eliminate the entire James name from Signal Mountain. And that's pretty much what I've got to say about it.
All right. Thank you so much for calling in, and we appreciate hearing from you and hope it's not the last time. All right. So now we move on to discussion, and appropriately so, the first discussion item is the James Monument and Park. We have no ordinances tonight, by the way. So I'm going to kick off here, picking up where we left off a couple of weeks ago. and as we just heard from citizens' opportunity to address council both now and a few minutes ago, my position both at that meeting and then to members of the press several have contacted me, and probably some of the rest of you over the last couple of weeks, has been that I wanted to listen for a couple of weeks, just hear what folks have to say. Hopefully I have a reputation for writing people back when they contact me in my role as a council member and as mayor, but I've mostly just read and basically aggregated the opinions over these past couple of weeks. So I want to apologize to anybody that I haven't written back, but quite honestly, we've all gotten a lot of email. We've gotten email on a variety of topics, and I'm not saying this in a whiny way, though I suspect it'll be interpreted that way. We're all volunteers as well. And to engage a national issue, that just wasn't reasonable for us to do that when we really needed to be listening for a little while. So my decision was practical as well as tactical. We've heard from all council members, have heard from folks with a variety of opinions, some very persuasive, some based on reporting and hearsay, but some persuasive and eloquent and rationally put together, well-supported arguments. When Boyd read his letter at the meeting 2 weeks ago, I didn't give him much of an opportunity to support his suggestion. He just read the letter, and that's the way I set it up, for better or worse. So I'd like to give an opportunity to him to do that in a moment. But first, I want to share with the other council members something that's been happening that I haven't had a chance to tell you yet. I've been in contact with Stuart James, who's C.E. James' grandson.
Great grandson.
Yes, thank you. And we've had an extensive conversation about this divisive issue. Talked a couple of times. The heated nature of the way this is played out in social media, and quite honestly, how it's been reported purposefully to create division, has been unfortunate. I've learned some stuff in the meantime that maybe we'll talk about it another time, but even though this has been upsetting to the James family, they'd like to see it come to an amicable solution. And Stuart is proposing some very positive ideas. He gave me permission to say this to all of you, but we'd like to talk some more. And so what I'm going to propose in a few minutes is that we table this for a few months to give Stuart and I an opportunity to meet a few more times in person. That's what we would like to do next, find a place that's safe, and then bring some ideas back from Stuart James that the council could maybe consider. He's been very positive about it. And anyway, I guess that's it. But for now, and we can talk about that in a minute, I guess I'd like to give Boyd a chance to elaborate at this point, if that's okay with the rest of the council. Anybody opposed to that? So Boyd, it's yours.
Thanks. When I sent the letter to council, I did not anticipate, excuse me, the prospect of simply reading it and then stepping back for 2 weeks. If I had, I would have put significantly more in there. I really anticipated it being more of an introduction to a discussion, which was largely what I wanted to bring about was a discussion. But I think it's important to understand how this all played out. And if I've given the impression that this was a very recent revelation, I did not intend to do that. I came across these documents quite a while ago. And I think there was some confusion about what I was researching at the time. So that's why I asked the mayor if I could go ahead and basically give the same explanation I intended to 2 weeks ago or whenever this came up. But I understood why he wanted to get it out, make sure people were aware of it, and give them plenty of time to address it before we even got into the discussion, and understood it, supported that, and was fine doing that. But I do appreciate the opportunity to kind of add the explanations I anticipated being able to do earlier. Again, I came across these quite some time ago. I was looking at restrictions on town property, something that we do fairly regularly. We have multiple properties that have restrictions on them, how they can be used. We have LPRF grants that have restrictions on them. If we're going to anticipate an LPRF grant that we would have to put deed restrictions on, we have to look to make sure there's not already deed restrictions that would complicate that. The situation with the MAC, when we looked at doing a lease there, go back and look at that lease to see exactly that deed, to see exactly what it said before we do that. So it's not something that's uncommon. This has been long enough ago. I don't remember exactly what it was that I was looking at that time, but that's what I was doing. I came across these deeds and read them. Was not looking for anything even remotely related to what I read. And I was somewhat taken aback by seeing it in writing in a legal document. Personally, I have strong feelings about it, but that is not what drives how I do my job. I don't have that luxury, and I try to make sure that when I consider what to do in terms of this position, it's based on what's best for the town. And frankly, when I read that, my first thoughts were, God, I hope nobody ever sees this. People already seem to think we're racist as it is. This is not going to help. And frankly, I set up camp there for quite a while. After that, when things would come up about our reputation, about how things work here in terms of the lack of diversity and all, I kind of saw that in a different perspective. Now knowing that that was in fact how this town came out of the ground, kind of developed it's not just a reputation, that's actually how it was. They did it. This was their fault. The fact that we still have that reputation came from that. Now, what did happen fairly recently that kind of started an evolution of thought for me was when Cheryl was appointed to council. And I don't know if you will even remember, but shortly thereafter, either before or after one of the meetings, somebody kind of jokingly said something about, well, now that we have 3 women on the council, we might actually get something done. And I think Cheryl mentioned that had actually happened once before back in the commission days. And that was pretty much it. That was discussion. It was lighthearted, and it was just an exchange. A while after that, I got to thinking about that exchange and the fact that is really the full extent of the discussion we can have about the diversity on our council or on any of our boards for that matter, and the town, and how many women versus how many men, and to be fully accurate, how many white women versus how many white men. And at that point, some of the questions that have come through my mind many times did so again. Are we ever going to see a time when that's not the case? Are we ever going to get past this reputation so that good people that might otherwise want to live uphill here will. And then what I hate to admit was a brand new thought question ran through my mind, and that was, well, are we ever going to get off our butts and actually try to do something about that? And that is really what started a very quick evolution of thought. And it's only a short distance from that position over to, it's not just their fault. It's not just about how this town started. We might, for lack of a better term, place blame there initially, maybe the first 50 years. But what about the second 50? What have we done to change that? Have we tried to change that reputation? Have we even acknowledged any of this and begun that process? And that's really what it's about. It's not as much about the past as it is ultimately trying to impact the future. And this is kind of in response to some of the things that have been said, and it's, to me, it's just the opposite of trying to erase history. It's really trying to acknowledge it in its fullness, understanding how that impacts us today, has for many years, and making a concerted effort to try to change that for the positive. They were very adamant and overt in their actions to exclude a segment of the population. It was very clear that they were not welcome. I fully understand that this is not the only place that was the case. But I think that we need to do something to begin that process, and it needs to be something that's overt, it's intentional, and it's meaningful, so that we at least have an opportunity to change the reputation that we have for the positive and impact the town and its future. I'm not looking to demonize Mr. James by any stretch. His accomplishments are outstanding. This is a fact. That's the monument that happens to be sitting in our front door. And that's it. That's the motivation for deciding to move in this direction. Once I did that and got through the process of working up the gumption to take the associated beating I assumed would come along with it, sent you guys that letter, and again, intending that would be an introduction to a discussion, not just being there on its own, which again, I completely agreed with. But I do think it's important, and I hope people understand how that evolved and why I made the suggestion and proposal that I did. That's it.
All right, thank you. Other council members?
I don't admonish you, Boyd, for bringing this to our attention. For me, I'm a lifetime resident of Signal Mountain, and so I have reflected on this. I'm sure we all have a lot in the last couple of weeks, but it's sort of like you look out a window and you see the same view for a really long time, and then when I saw that this language was in the deed covenants, it was sort of like I saw something outside that window I'd never pondered before in a really tangible way. Although I know that there has been a negative perception by a lot of people who don't live up here that that it's not, you know, that we have a lack of hospitality for people of color. I don't know if y'all want to indulge me, but I have done a lot of research the last 2 weeks. I've spent a lot of time working on this, and so I'd like to read something and have it put into the record, if you can indulge me for about 4 minutes. Restrictive covenants written into property deeds were commonplace in post-Reconstruction communities all across the country. According to deeds.com, in an article published on July 22nd, 2019, the real estate industry embraced the use of deed covenants to keep minority groups from moving into developments in the early 1900s, starting in California and Massachusetts. Other states followed and courts backed them up. Supreme Courts in no less than 14 states upheld racial covenants. And it wasn't until 1948 that the Supreme Court of the United States deemed race restrictions unconstitutional. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 explicitly outlawed the inclusion of race-based covenants in deeds. So this was a mere 52 years ago. As we have all learned recently, the town of Signal Mountain has not been spared this unfortunate practice in the founding of our community by C.E. James. This reckoning has forced many of us to consider the level of hospitality that our community has historically shown towards people of color. In learning more about this deed covenant practice, I have spent a great deal of time studying our historical roots, reading numerous sources of historical material about our community, and talking with some local people who have knowledge of Signal Mountain's history. It is my opinion that based on this research that Charles E. James did not exhibit racist behavior or engage in racist activities. He was the son of Jesse and Sarah James. Jesse was a merchant and Methodist minister born at James Crossroads in Sullivan County, Tennessee, near Bristol, Virginia. Charles and his 3 brothers were also born in this part of Tennessee, and the family moved to Chattanooga in 1854 when he was 3 years old. 2 of the James brothers fought for the Union in the Civil War. All 4 James brothers were successful businessmen in their own right. One brother, John, was clerk and master in Hamilton County and ultimately served as alderman and mayor for the city of Chattanooga. Elbert A. James was a Chattanooga lawyer, politician, and state legislator. As many of us are aware, CE's contributions to Chattanooga and Signal Mountain are well documented. He was a successful financier and industrialist. In 1913, he brought a trolley line up to his Signal Mountain Inn. The inn, located between Chicago or New York and Florida, was the premier place for travelers to stay. Old Town, our historic district, was developed by Mr. James and is listed on the National Historic Registry. He established the Signal Mountain Golf and Country Club and Rainbow Lake Wilderness, the 239-acre property now owned by the town. He served as the first mayor of Signal Mountain in 1919. He is described in a book called A History of Signal Mountain by Helen Carruth Stapleton as a modest man who shunned publicity and avoided politics. Quote, the most lovable of his qualifications was his insatiable desire to help those who needed help and to furnish employment for the unemployed, she writes. One of his most trusted friends, C.B. Adams, the town's superintendent for 30 years and for whom Adams Square is named, is also described as having sympathies with the Union, who served as a captain in the Union Army. These do not sound like post-war with civil rights in the early 1900s. This is certain. There is certainly no evidence to support this. because language is prevalent in housing developments all across the country. I believe James, who is a practicing attorney in Chattanooga, describes his great-grandfather as Stewart carries on his family's legacy of service, having been actively involved in local and state Democratic politics and causes for many years. Further, none of us who were alive at the time to know C.E. James's heart, and there is no known record in which he explains himself. So we have to judge history based on what is readily available and take whatever action is deemed appropriate. As presidential historian and Chattanooga native John Meacham stated in an interview with philanthropist David Rubenstein in June, quote, "History is a struggle, and we live with contradictions and moral judgments about people in the past. Nativism, racism, and tribalism forces ebb and flow. They shape all of us. It is glib to think the destruction or removal of a statue somehow redeems the past. The work has to be done. The work has to be to look at the past and realize the contributions preserved." He also states that, quote, "The test of a public figure being commemorated on public land should be to answer the question, were you devoted to a more perfect union? If you took up arms to end the American experiment, you don't belong." I agree with his interpretation and assessment. Therefore, taking all of this into account, I am opposed to moving the James plaque and renaming the park on Signal Mountain. Did deed restrictions equate to taking up arms against our American experiment, as John Meacham asks us to consider? Given the circumstances at the time, I think not. Are there actions we can take as a council to try and make good on a bad practice, even though it was abolished once and for all by the federal government in 1968? I believe there are options available to us that can help us make peace with our past so that we can plan for a more inclusive and equitable future. Signal Mountain can take action to repudiate offensive and harmful language used in these very antiquated, outdated, and unlawful deed covenants without taking the overly drastic measure of removing the plaque, remembering our town's founder. And we can also disavow the covenant and declare that all people are welcome enthusiastically and unequivocally, as recommended in The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein in the deeds.com article dated 7/22/2019. Is this accomplished by adding a second plaque contextualizing the deed restriction? Could this plaque incorporate the town's centennial trace to our history? The town of Signal Mountain has a historical committee who could be charged with trying to contextualize all of this. I believe when the time is right that we can and should convene this conversation. Signal Mountain's best days are ahead of us. Under the current circumstances we are collectively facing as a community, I think it would be advisable to table this for a time. In the future, when we are all in a better, safer place. The current council is short one member, and we have an upcoming election in November where 3 council seats will be filled. Most importantly, everyone is dealing with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Fear and uncertainty are prevalent in all our lives. This is a dialogue that would be best conducted and deliberated on in person. So I think that kind of echoes what you said, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. A lot of work and great contribution to the discussion, which is what we're having. So, anyone else want to chime in?
If I could just real quickly ask Councilmember Murdoch if you could forward a copy of that to me for your inclusion in the minutes would be most helpful.
I will do it. I'll
Thank
send
you
one
so
to
much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Bill, I think you shook your head no.
That's right.
And Cheryl?
Well, Susanna used all the good words. So I've just got a few left. I've lived here a long, long time, not as long as many of my neighbors here. I know that any action we take cannot undo the damage done to people of color over the last many, many, many decades. However, I do think we could take some actions, be it to better inform the coming generations and the ones living up here right now that, yes, that's how it was at that time. That's not how we are now. And going forward, we want to make it even better up here on the mountain for our next centennial. So I think there's a lot of room in there for some compromise. You can't erase the past. You can't change the past. You can acknowledge it and thus acknowledge that it wasn't perfect, but we can set about making changes that will make things better, I hope, for all of our citizens up here and citizens yet to come. So I'm in agreement. Let's give it some time. Let's spell on it a little bit and do some more research. Susanna's done a great job with that already. And maybe give it a few more months and then revisit this.
And I will be bringing back some suggestions from the James family.
Right.
And I think that's helpful. So with that, if no one else, there's nothing on, I mentioned maybe tabling, but there's actually not a proposal on the table. So at this point, I think we go on to the next discussion item. Next we have Town Park. So, and I think this is on here, Brill, because you mentioned last time, maybe we need to take a look at Town Park names and things. Are you willing to hold off on that for a little bit as we, or is that something you want to elaborate on? You're muted still.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, let's just table that for later.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Recreation Facilities Flag Football. And Sam, if you can bring Dave Wagner into the picture.
I believe we had Mr. Wagner earlier. He is no longer in the waiting room. So if he is out there, please call back in. I do have Jared, but I do not. And I spoke with Mr. Wagner earlier. He was planning to be part of the meeting. So
will you try to contact him and
sure.
Go ahead and bring Jared in? I don't mind kicking this thing off. The proposal, we have a couple of things working, and I'll start with I'll start one direction and then end up maybe in another direction on this. Tennessee's numbers are not the best, obviously. We are not the health department. Schools are starting back. I have to say the proposal that Dave Wagner put together, I was impressed by that and the measures that they're taking and the safety relief valves that they put into it. But I would rather have Dave Wagner explain it rather than me explain it. So I'm going to give Sam a chance to try to get him back online. Jared, from just a practical standpoint, a pragmatic standpoint of town departments, are we prepared should flag football resume?
Dan, I just got in. I didn't hear your question.
So should flag football resume, are we practically prepared?
Well, I guess that's the question at hand. We've made it through with baseball that has 3 times the numbers. Granted, I get, we have there's a little more contact with football. So that's a conversation to have.
Well, I guess I'm not asking from a safety standpoint. I'm asking from a facility standpoint.
Facilities, yes. We're fine there.
And
sorry to interrupt. Mr. Wagner's joining us now.
Oh, excellent. And Boyd, you probably just remember this, or you may have pulled these documents up. We specifically said our fields are open to non-organized sports, and that wasn't by resolution. That was by just a meeting like we're having right now, where at some point we kind of voted. Is that correct?
Correct. We closed everything and then opened up the fields for individual use, but not by leagues. And then you addressed baseball in the same manner you are now flag football, and the vote was whether or not to allow them to proceed with the season. So that, I would imagine, would be the process here, and would be the question. So it would be an affirmative to allow them as opposed to not allow them.
Okay. So David has joined us now. Dave, if you'll unmute your microphone. None of us speaks. You're finding the button. We've seen this looking for the button. Look
Here,
on
there
many
you-
people.
can you
There
hear
you go. We are, none of us as individuals speaks for the council. So I'm speaking for myself now that, it frightens me that we become, that anything we do become a nexus point. As I told you when I wrote you, I'm impressed by the safety measures that you've taken. So would you like to go ahead and just explain to the general public watching this how it is you intend to proceed, why you think it's safe, and what you would do should it become unsafe, and how you would determine that?
And just before you do that, could you give your name and address for the record?
Absolutely. My name is David Wagner. I live at 930 Ridgeway Avenue. Well, first, I'm going to start with the assumption that you've all had an opportunity to go through the PowerPoint and
the updated one.
I want to start with the obvious stuff. If school isn't meeting face-to-face, then we're not having anything. We'll abide by any and all restrictions for everyone's safety. The county mask mandate is a given. And I think the entire discussion starts there with what are our givens. Normally we play 7 versus 7 on the field. In order to reduce the crowd numbers, I'm reducing that to 5 on 5 with a cap at 7 per team with an average of 3 fans per player, and fans includes coaches. That puts 21 per team on the field on the sideline. By keeping our numbers that way, we keep any crowd under 50, and obviously the kids on the field are separated. When we line the field, in addition to the lines on the field, we're going to have a dotted line beyond the sideline, and then dividing lines for 7 groups down the sideline, so that each, what I'm calling a pod, each fan group has their area socially distanced from the others, and those are on their team. The other team will be on the other side of the field. We're going to stagger our game times so that we allowed for crowd turnover. We're canceling the rookie clinic. We're canceling our jamboree. We're canceling preseason scrimmages, which means for the first 4 weeks, the only kids that the kids on a team see are the kids on their team. And again, that's capped at 7, so that each practice, even if you've got 4 parents helping, you have a grand total of 11. And those parents, incidentally, would be masked at least as long as the county mandate. What else? The first 2 weeks will be contactless practices. We're going to make major use of blocking pads and Lysol. That way, even within, they don't have tight interactions.
Someone joked, could you make the flags be Clorox wipes?
I like that. That'd work on a variety of levels. But along those lines, balls and flags, flag belts, each team has their own set, so they're not mingling amongst kids anyway. And I'm going to stock up each coach with enough Lysol to do them through the season to make sure that before and after each game, all of those things are Lysoled up.
Is a Lysol spray considered effective by the CDC as killing germs on a surface for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we're dropping 4 kids on the field, we're going to be able to drop from 3 referees to 2. I know of at least one, and one of those will be a TSSAA ref. I've already got them lined up. and at least one of the teen refs will be one of those guys' sons. So that still keeps the pod tight. Staggered. Everybody over the age of 12 will be masked. Sorry, it's humid and the pages stick. We've got rule adjustments too. Generally, our scrimmage lines are 5 yards away from each other with a minimum distance of 1 yard, such as when it's tight for a first down or for a touchdown. We're going to increase that minimum distance to 2 yards, 6 feet. Social distance, it gives us a minimum social distance before the play begins. Alignment requirements will be fingertip distance between players on the same team, no bunch formations. Huddles will be tiered so that you've got 3 kids behind, 2 kids in front, or 3 in front, 2 behind. That way, instead of circled, so that you don't have everyone breathing into a pit. Coaches will be able to use charts, and that way we avoid that common breathing area. We've had a change in the last couple of years. In fact, since Mr. Veal saw his grandson play, in the way we coach flag pulling, that actually decreases the number of times they end up in a jumble at the end of a play, and saw that to good effect when used. We get 60 plays from scrimmage, generally a game. Part of what we do there is make sure every kid runs the ball at least once, preferably twice during the game, and occasionally we get a third one in. The fact that we only have 60 plays from scrimmage is significant because the average play lasts 7 seconds. With the unjumble at the end adding another 6, you've got 13 seconds from snap to just after the whistle before the kids on different teams are separated. 13 seconds by 60 plays on the field, and that assumes they're never on the sideline. Still doesn't meet the 10 to 15 minute minimum that the CDC recommends you stay below. Time in the huddle is roughly 20 seconds, but again, that's your pod. So the inter-team exchanges last for short enough a period that even cumulatively during the game, there wouldn't be enough to be worrisome from the CDC standpoint. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone's got.
I've seen some talk in the NFL about everybody having a shield. Is that just not practical because of expense? A helmet shield.
I would want to avoid a helmet unless you're talking about the band and a face shield.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how practical that would be once they get warmer and sweat and that, but I'm sure if the town were willing to budget for it, we would be more happy to make use of it.
That was sneaky. All right, questions from council members? All right, so
I know I might have a question, or I know, during the baseball season, they really did a great job, which I think it sounds like you've got similar plans laid out for keeping people distanced and all of that. But they did have a kind of an outbreak with an assistant coach, and they had to suspend games and all of that. So I'm sure you've got kind of a plan in place to troubleshoot when those scenarios come up. And I mean, I'm really concerned about it. I saw in the news today that 14 Macaulay football players were diagnosed positive today, and they are under strict quarantine for the next 14 days. So how do you, if you have a positive case that comes up, what are your plans to try to troubleshoot and, figure that out?
Well, I suspect it would be very similar to what baseball did and what softball had in mind as well, was that exactly that. You do the protocol. You shut down anybody that they were in contact with for that period of time and make sure that everybody's safe and secure before you begin to put anyone at risk. That brings me to one question I did have for the council. One thing that I think we've got going forward for us is what I refer to as our geographic insularity. The only area where I'm considering a tweak in what I've already proposed, and I mentioned it in there, is restricting it to those that attend elementary school on the mountain or homeschool. Sadly, not only would that negate anyone coming up the mountain and playing in our league, but it would also negate anyone that lives on the mountain that goes to a school like Wright's or St. Nicholas or CCS. I am kind of looking for a little guidance from the town council on what they think about that.
We do have that geographic insulation somewhat, which can play against you also should you get an infection. And I think in light of that also, you know, the pods, the shutdown, there's only one football team at a high school, so they're shutting the program down. And I think you didn't say this directly, but it sounds like if you shut that group down, I think the town council still might say, no, the whole thing needs to be shut down.
Oh, I wouldn't disagree.
Yeah.
Now we do have, in the middle of our season, we have a 2-week dead period for a fall break, which hopefully makes sure everybody's got their immune systems up.
There is no immunity to this.
No, but due to other infections, which make you weaker.
Sure, yeah. All right. Other discussions? I appreciate, you know, the planning and the thought that you've gone into this and understanding the gravity of the situation. I don't for a second want to say that because the county did something that we're required to do it that way. The county just made, you know, contact sports. I think it was yesterday. They put the release out. They're allowing them on county fields again. That doesn't mean that we have to do this, council. I mean, these fields belong to the town of Signal Mountain. At the same time, we've gotten very, again, passionate and well-reasoned emails from folks saying why they think their kids need this just to be healthy. You know, it's a part of their lives, and kids are taking a lot of the heat for what's happening here. And so for the same reasons that I thought we should, with restrictions, open the pool, and it seemed to work out, you know, for most of the summer, I'd like to propose that we allow them to continue this with the understanding that just like we did with the pool, that when we have our next council meeting, we talk about it again and see how it's gone. I think the CDC is now saying that it's about 10 days that, you know, they've shortened it from 2 weeks to 10 days when somebody is in their infectious period. And, you know, if something went wrong, we might know before the next council meeting. So anyway, because of the nature of this, I think we should probably take a vote. So I move that we allow our fields to be used for flag football under the restrictions that have been presented to us. What do you call your league, David?
Signal Mountain Youth Flag Football.
You got that, Carol? Okay, so
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
I'm nervous about it,
Well,
but I think we're all being asked to take on different layers of risk and to exposure. And if families are willing, to take this on, I understand the need for children to have, to be able to be outside and engage in activity. And as long as we can put the safeguards in place, I think we just need to give them the chance to do it.
I think it changes something in the community, and this is what scares me about it. If I'm a grandparent, and if my grandchildren don't play flag football, they're too young anyway. But if they did, I think that would eliminate my ability to see them because of my age. Because that would then be changing the cohort, or the pod that they work within, that we've kind of worked with our family structure.
Unless you were the coach.
What's that?
Unless you were the coach.
Unless I was the coach. Well, but it's opening you up to every other family's best or worst practices.
Oh, I get that. I'm as diabetic as can be, and I promise you, my wife is as worried as you would be about it.
Yeah.
If it matters, we've already got 80-something kids who have been registered to play. That's actually ahead of where we usually are.
Any other thoughts?
Mayor, if I might.
I think the baseball and softball motion, Boyd, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were conditioned on signing waivers. And I'm not sure if that's a part of what's been proposed here or not.
Yeah, that's
But I assume that would need to be done.
what I was going to ask, if we needed to include the same type of agreement with the league.
I don't have any problem with that. I would suggest, though, that we use the language Signal Mountain Fields instead of specifying fields so that we don't have any issues.
Why is that?
When baseball and softball were playing, they specified fields, and that ended up becoming a sticking point.
In what way?
Getting practice times for boys and girls.
That was resolved
Right.
fairly easily, I think. But
Right.
as long as we don't have any conflicting uses, then it shouldn't be an issue. The problem there was we had two separate leagues that we were trying to accommodate.
Yeah, I was just trying to avoid any potential from past experience.
All right, any other comment? So, Carol, if you'll read the motion as it's written, just to make sure that that's what we intend, and we obviously need to contain the legal language within that. I don't know if the motion needs to be modified.
The motion, as I wrote it down, is to allow fields to be used under the restrictions presented by the Signal Mountain Youth Football.
We need to add to that, don't you think, Harry?
I don't know what the restrictions are that the youth football has suggested, but I suspect we do. To add the waiver language at least.
And require a signed waiver by any participants.
Yeah, which will include the signed waivers by guardians or parents of the participants.
We've got a standard waiver that we use, and added language that they will abide by any and all state, federal, and local COVID restrictions.
Okay, I think this one is probably as much to do with indemnification of the town.
Well, part of the standard is that we indemnify the town each year. There's a rider that goes in with it.
Right.
It's just part of what I do, add to it each year.
All right. Are we ready to vote?
Are you changing your motion or leaving it as is?
No, we're changing the motion to require signing of a waiver. So do I need to withdraw my motion and redo it?
You can amend your motion and then
Let me
get,
amend my motion. I would like to amend my motion to add the wording we've just discussed for. That's
not helpful.
Your face told me that.
You saw that look,
How should we say it, Harry?
well, read again what the motion that was presented, Carol.
Allow fields to be used under the restrictions presented by the Signal Mountain Youth Football.
Just which will include execution of indemnity agreements and or waivers by parents or guardians of all participants.
Couldn't that say as provided by the town of Signal Mountain? So it's our waiver.
It's your motion, but that sounds like a good suggestion.
Okay.
Needs to be flag football.
Did you get that part, Carol?
No.
Needs to be flag football. Sorry.
So I've got to include indemnification or waiver signed by parents or guardians of all participants. So where did you want me to include language about the town?
As provided, the indemnification is as provided by the town of Signal Mountain. In other words, this is going to be our piece of paper as opposed to the Flag Football League's piece of paper.
Okay, so now what I have, because I know I heard one other addition you wanted to do, allow the fields to be used under the restrictions presented by the Signal Mountain Youth Football.
Flag football.
That was it. Flag football. Under the restrictions presented by the Signal Mountain Youth Flag Football to include inclusion of indemnification as provided by the town of Signal Mountain or waiver signed by parents or guardians of all participants.
You might want to clean that up, Harry.
To include indemnification and or waivers.
Okay.
Provided by the town of, or to be signed by parents or guardians of participants.
We have our wording backwards because
Well,
it's
let's go
providing parents. Yeah.
Indemnification or waivers provided by the town of Signal Mountain.
Okay.
And then signed by, et cetera.
All right, I've got it.
Do we need
You want me to read it one more time, don't you?
Probably a good idea.
I believe you though.
Allow fields to be used under the restrictions provided by the Signal Mountain Youth Flag Football to include indemnification and or waiver as provided by the town of Signal Mountain to be signed by parents or guardians of all participants. Did I get close?
I think that's right.
Very.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have you amending it. I now need Councilmember Murdoch to also amend her second.
So I will rescind my initial second.
I don't think you have to.
Second. Oh, okay. Then I amend my second
Okay.
to, I mean, yeah, so I still second the motion.
Second the amended motion.
I second the amended motion, yes.
And I think there's a clause where you have to repeat the motion from memory right now.
I can't do
We
it,
might be
so.
here a while, Dan.
Okay. All right, Carol, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Vice Mayor Bill Lusk,
Yes.
Councilmember Cheryl Graham,
Yes.
Councilmember Susanna Murdoch,
Yes.
Mayor Dan Lander.
Yes. All right, thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you all for your service too.
Appreciate your taking this seriously.
You as well.
If you can get the agenda up, please, Sam.
You got to talk about the interconnect now.
Yeah. If with the council's permission, we're going to talk about the interconnect. I mean, that's going to put us at about 2 hours. I would like to propose that we consider, because we've got Eric Mitchell standing by, would there be any objection to moving the property maintenance and wildland urban interface codes and building code fee schedule discussion to the next meeting? I've asked Boyd in case this meeting ran long, and he said it won't hurt them. How's everyone feel about that?
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I agree.
Bill? You okay with that? We didn't hear you, but
Yes.
we saw you. Okay, so our last discussion item will be the interconnect. So if we can bring Adam Chronologer in, who's our water director. I'm only saying his last name because I like saying it, knowing that there's no vowels in the first 4 or 5 letters.
I've learned to spell his name by putting the vowels in and then going back after I've finished and taking them back out.
Taking them back out. Yeah, we're talking about you, Adam.
That's never a good thing.
All right. Can you bring us, well, I'd also like to mention that it just reminded me, one of the things we asked at the last council meeting was that from here forward, we include one of the department heads in every council meeting to talk about their department. And in this case, it was going to be Adam, but then we ended up needing to bring Loretta in as well because of the public works discussion. So we appreciate you being here for a couple of reasons tonight. Adam is the director. He's how long you been on the job now, Adam?
This is my 5th month, so I've completed 4 months.
So I just want to note that Adam came in after some of the interconnect discussions had taken place and after some of the meetings had, all of the meetings had taken place. And so if the chronology of what was discussed prior to his coming here doesn't exactly match up, it may have to do with Adam's position and examining and doing exactly what we hired him to do. So just to toss that out there, but Adam, bring us up to date on the interconnect.
Well, and kind of to that point, I don't know if there's just been a lack of communication or some pieces of information misconstrued, but the citizens that continually ask about it, I'm getting, it seems to be new information every time I hear questions. I'm not aware of any kind of votes you guys did, or maybe I need to be brought up to speed on what options are actually on the table. I've read through the Arcadis study that was done several years ago, and it's a really good study, and the proposal that's continually asked about is not even the recommended one. So that's why
Adam,
it's got a little confusion.
So because first off, it's a deep well when you start talking about, a lot of people don't even know what Arcadis is if they aren't involved in this on a daily basis. Explain it to the council as if you're also explaining it to a lot of citizens that are watching and have just heard, wait a second, the town's supposed to have an interconnect. Why don't we have one yet? And what is an interconnect and who wants it? And what are, fill it in a little bit more for us.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Again, since Adam wasn't involved in a lot of that on the front end, I think he may need a little assistance with that.
Yes.
I'm happy to provide that.
Well, that works too.
Okay. We did have a study done. It was a joint process between Walden Utility District and the town. and had the engineering done to look at options for an interconnect. Ultimately,
Boyd, I'm sorry. Even things like Walden's Ridge Utility District, there are people who do not know what that is. They think that's something from the town of Walden. So be detailed. It's a water utility that provides, it's not Walden. It provides water to some residents of Signal Mountain and to some residents of Walden, as well as some people, I believe, in the Sequatchie Valley, and maybe even off the mountain on the Chattanooga side. Not sure about that one, but.
So they are a neighboring water utility. Ultimately, the report suggested an interconnection at Taft Highway and Miles Road. The suggested connection would be on the town's side of Miles Road, and would connect to, depending on how you look at it, 2 or 3 6-inch lines that intersects there. There's one that runs up and down the highway and one that runs up Miles Road. And the connection there could ultimately push water in 3 different directions there. And they determined that from the town's perspective, it would provide enough water to serve our system. There's always been an issue relative to the ability of the town to provide enough water to WRUD, the neighboring water utility, unless they provide supplemental pumping, because a large portion of their system is at higher elevation than ours. So it technically wouldn't be a matter of not being able to provide them the water. We just couldn't push it very far. So they would have to pump it. If they pump the water on into their system, then we, from the engineering, should be able to provide the amount of water that they need. That was where we started down the path of creating that connection. Ultimately, Walden requested that we look at Walden's Ridge Utility District requested that we look at putting a 12-inch line up Miles Road so that we could better serve them. Ultimately, that wouldn't really allow us to provide them more water. They would still have to pump it. What was considered and the council did vote on was to look at that prospect and see if we could determine as much as we could about what that cost might look like. Walden Ridge Utility District did provide us a cost estimate for materials, and we did some exploration in terms of trying to determine rock depth. The issue we ran into there, unless we're going to really tear that road up or get into people's yards, we're not going to be able to do much more of that without causing significant damage. Generally, when we do a project like this, that's not the case. We don't generally do a lot of excavation to determine rock depth. When we did the projects in Old Town, around South Palisades, we didn't have that information. And generally in those situations, a contractor will either take a risk associated with a hard cost, or they'll include a rock clause in the contract that will address them hitting substantial rock in the process. So that's kind of where we ran into a sticking point. was really being able to determine much further what that rock looks like. This is about the time that Adam came on, and he was involved in trying to see what we could figure out about the rock. And it's also the time that we moved forward with the meter project that he's been very busy with, which, by the way, the meters are here, and unless something's changed, they plan to start installation this week. So that's kind of how that played out. During that same period, I don't remember exactly when it was, we had a conversation with the director of Walden's Ridge Utility District right after Adam came, and he informed us that if the proposed development goes in at Timesville, they would be running a 12-inch line to that point, without a doubt. And he's also, in my understanding, talked to Chief Williams Chief Mitchell, that he would be pushing some larger lines towards St. Ives as well. So if that's the case, then there'll be a 12-inch line at Timesville, and for the same basic project and cost, we could take it from there and run it all the way to our tank, as opposed to just getting it up Miles Road and connecting to an 8-inch. That significantly changes the whole scenario for us, and I think for them down the road, should the prospect be to purchase at least some of our water from them. As I understand it, that case, there was a lawsuit and it has gone to court, and the judge has asked them to go to mediation. So we expect there's a potential that we could find out how that's going to go within just a few weeks. So with that new prospect, feel it's advisable to wait that out and see if we can make the same investment but get a much better outcome.
So Adam, are there any questions that you would have for council as to our understanding, or anything that you'd want to know from us that you feel like you're in the dark on?
Well, I am a little confused on people thinking an actual project was voted on. I don't know where that came from. I haven't heard that anywhere.
Well, we voted that it's been talked about for years, and we did vote to pursue an interconnect with a couple of options, but another option got put on the table. And I think one of the things that's also confusing is negotiations aren't done in public often on these things. You have to talk to people, and you have to have relationships, and you don't, sometimes they can be strained, perhaps even. And I just think people who manage projects have to be able to make decisions on the ground as well.
Well, in looking at the study, the suggestions they gave, and I've talked with Boyd about this too, that the option of running that line up Miles doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And when you look at the study, the gallons per minute doesn't even change from what their hydraulic module shows, other than just connecting at Taft Highway to our 6-inch, which is much more cost effective for us. You're getting the same flow is what their model shows.
Did WRUD hire an engineer to look into that for them?
That I don't know.
So if someone said, well, that doesn't work for us, how do we weight that? Is that just, well, no, we want to do something else? Or is that an engineer says it's not an acceptable solution?
That's a good question. It works for us. You know what I mean? If this is going to be considered an emergency interconnect, to where if something happens with our main feed, we can quickly supply our residents with water with, little to no interruption.
And theirs.
Correct. As far as I know, they don't have any kind of booster system ready for us either, which would be a substantial price and timeline, I would assume. But like I said, my main concern was spending 3 times the amount of money. The material cost that was provided by Walden's Ridge was about $67,000 just in material to run a 12-inch line from Taft Highway to James Boulevard.
Is WRUD waiting for any information from us?
Not that I know of, not that I'm aware of.
Boyd?
I don't know what information we were able to gain from the rock exploration, for lack of a better term, has been conveyed or not, but ultimately, Ron indicated that absent that information, he could give us an estimate that would be somewhat of a worst case scenario. But again, that's kind of what we deal with on major projects, either a base cost with a rock clause or a significant amount of rock work built into it that we could then deduct should it not be necessary.
Have we asked for that?
Specifically?
Yes.
No, he indicated that he could provide that. We haven't gone back and asked him for that specifically, no.
Should we?
We can do that.
Seems like we should. So we
Well,
have,
I could get quotes from actual contractors. That's not an issue. The issue was, to me, I don't think that's an option that we should explore. A 12-inch down miles is not, like I said, it's not that beneficial to us if the gallons per minute don't change. And now with the new development of new information, of the possibility of being able to connect straight to the tank with a 12-inch instead of running 12 to an 8 to the tank, I think that's a much better option we should look at.
let me ask this from a different direction. If, let's take that new development off the table, let's say that doesn't exist. And if we said, we want to go with what Arcadis has said, and WRUD said, well, we're not doing that, where would we be then?
That's a good question.
What would our next
Who
move
has
be?
the last answer to that, you know?
Can I just
Yeah,
mention one thing?
Same
I
question
just,
could be asked if they say yes, move forward with continuing up miles, and we say no. It's the same thing. Who has the last decision?
Yeah, Sam had something.
yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention my recollection, and this doesn't take into account whether there may be opinions and feelings on their side as to what option they would like to pursue, them being WRUD. But I do recall, I believe, and correct me if y'all think I'm wrong, their engineer that they hired did concur that in theory, according to the modeling, that everything that was said was correct about the amount of water we could provide them was adequate.
The Arcadis modeling.
Since you talked about that a minute ago, I did want to throw that out, but that is my recollection of what they're, without doing further modeling on his side, he concurred that the formulas and whatever it takes to get those numbers were accurate in theory.
Was that at the meeting that took place at WRUD? Do I remember that correctly?
Yes.
So from an engineering standpoint, there's no reason that we couldn't go with what Arcadis suggested. It would be a business decision on the case of either us or WRUD that would prevent it from happening, right?
Seems that way.
Yes. And ultimately, as is the case, whether you guys are the water board or the council, in most instances, your decision is going to govern what we do. I think it's our job, especially with this new prospect coming up, that when we had that meeting, it had not even been mentioned. I think we have to look at big picture, and when you're looking at a tremendously more beneficial scenario for basically the same cost. Yes, we've had a close call recently, but that's one in many, many years. I think, you know, my thought process is a little bit of time to evaluate that as a potential improvement and return on investment is kind of where we ended up. If we want to move forward with information gathering on the other prospect, we can do that. But again, the main thing being that we ran out of space to do much exploration on miles without really tearing up the road or getting into people's property. There's really no shoulder through there.
It wasn't a lack of not doing the work. It was you did the work to the point that it was cost effective to do the work.
Yeah, 'cause we were to the point where if we were going to have to start doing exploratory digging in people's yards, the easiest, least invasive way of doing that is going to be a hydro excavating, where we can vacuum out the spoils as they come out of the ground and not destroy everybody's yards. Well, then we don't have a hydro excavator. It's something we're going to have to rent. Would be the cleanest route to pothole. And like I said, if it's not a legitimate route we're taking, I didn't see spending that time and effort and money.
Well, can we come to whatever the next action is, assuming the new development doesn't appear? I mean, we have to assume that because that's a strong option. It would be great to have an answer as what do we do next? Then what is our next move? Do we formally draw up a contract? I mean, could Harry even be working on that right now? That says, let's go forward with the lines that exist as presented by Arcadis, so that somebody's saying yes or no, and we know where we are in this thing. I agree that it's frustrating for it to just be hanging out there. I also agree that it makes sense if you got another option to explore it, but we got to move forward with that. Is that a reasonable approach?
Yes, sir. I think so.
Yeah, for me, for sure.
Anybody else have any other want to chime in on this? Want to get you some of this?
Just so I'm clear and I understand how this process is working as well. This was considered and is considered an emergency interconnect, correct? Or is this supposed to supply part of our town with water?
Well, I'm speaking very extemporaneously now. I think it got muddled also with the selling our water company process, and they're looking at if our water company sold, how water would be delivered to us by another company. This emergency interconnect doesn't preclude that in any way, but it also, based on any discussion I've ever been in, is not designed to be a precursor that if we wanted to change water companies, we could just do that. This is an emergency interconnect. Does anybody else remember that any other way?
Well, I think in the meeting at Walden, there was discussion about the prospect of feeding at least a portion, our northern portion on James to address pressure issues there. Also, since that time, I think Adam has identified some issues within the system that we may be able to correct that might positively impact that issue as well. So,
right. Didn't
the prospect of it being somewhat more than an emergency interconnect has been discussed.
That was potentially changing the school and some of the residences over to WRUD. Is that part of this, which would be, beneficial to them, but also beneficial to the residences because they'd have better water pressure? Is that right?
Right. That's an area that is significantly lower in pressure than any other area. And the discussion was, if we were to run a 12-inch up miles as WRUD was proposing and requesting, that could be a potential benefit on our side, which is going to put that scenario in a little different light.
Well, beneficial to the residents, not beneficial to the water company. The financial benefit would be to WRUD.
Correct. But our function as a utility is to provide adequate, dependable service, not only for potable water, but also for fire protection. And that scenario might help us do that better, is what I was getting at.
All that is and as the study suggests, it should. It says in there that it should improve some flow to that area. They're not saying how much. It's all a guesstimate.
Is that because they weren't specifically looking at that?
And I mean, that's a possibility. It was listed as an alternative to one of their suggestions, but it was not their most recommended suggestion. But the reason, I guess the main reason I was asking the question on whether that was going to be a permanent transfer of water to Walden's Ridge was to how Boyd mentioned it earlier. I've been trying to look at some options, which I showed in the PowerPoint to the meter presentation as well. As this is one of those other projects that needs to be looked at, is the pressure in that area. I had one of TAUD's, our actual rep for this area for Tennessee Authority of Utility Districts. Their rep came and met with me on this pressure issue last week. And we're gonna start looking at some options on that as well. Some things to test out in that area and try to improve that pressure in house that I think will be much more beneficial than using Walden's Ridge as the provider of water. I think the thing that worries me the most about that is, as old as the plumbing is and the pipes are in this area, all of a sudden reversing flow on old pipes and cast iron mains permanently, on top of Walden's Ridge being one of the top highest water rates in the state. That's just two options that concern me.
All right, if no one has any more questions on that or anything you need to add, Adam, would you mind giving us an update on the water meter installation?
Sure. I actually wrote this up. I think you had mentioned this probably a month or so ago, but I did want to give you guys an update if you had a couple minutes on kind of the whole department. Meters, I can jump on meters real quick. We've got 3,000 meters on site. I've got another 300 coming, and that's going to get us really close to our numbers. Today I ordered some of the larger meters. We got a count on those. So the 1-inch meters will be coming. 1,000 radios are meant to be delivered either this Thursday or Friday. The radio is just the second part of the meter. Got to have both to be able to install all that. And our installer Aquameter, they're going to be on site next Monday, the 18th.
Wow.
So we're hammering down on it now. They're going to do what they call a slow start. In the first couple of days, we're going to put in a handful of meters. We're going to stop, put them straight into the system. We're going to look at everything, make sure the numbers are right, make sure they're reading, make sure the system's reading the meters before they really start throwing meters in the ground.
How are you choosing those customers?
We're actually supposed to start reading meters this Thursday or Friday. So that'll be our cycle 1 billing. So as we're starting, they're going to start in cycle 3, kind of the opposite end of where we start, hoping they'll have that done by the time we get there, or the majority of it. So we're starting on the front end, they're going to start on the back end.
Can we make sure that those customers have some kind of notice that there's going to be some odd activity?
Yeah, I've actually already had door hangers printed. Sherry delivered those to me today, so that will go to Aquameter. So as they finish one, they'll leave a note on the door, hey, your meter's been changed. You may have air in your lines because of the temporary cut in water. It's an easy fix with just flushing your cold water faucets. We're going to have basically a social media blast and some notifications on our website, letting everybody know that the meter change out is starting. You're going to see vehicles you may not recognize. They have promised me all vehicles are marked, strobes. The employees are wearing branded Aquameter uniforms. We had talked a little bit about maybe giving them some cards with at least my contact information on there or something to do with the town, so people do understand they are with us, they're a contractor for us. But I think we're ready for the most part for them to get started.
That's exciting.
It's exciting. It is. Yeah, we're gonna start pushing that out here soon as far as notifications, just so everybody's got a heads up.
So I think I derailed you from your planned presentation. So pick up wherever you want to.
Oh yeah, I had some quick things, and I think first and foremost, I really want to thank my employees in the water department. All the guys have really stepped up. Not only in all the changes that I'm throwing at them, which are good changes, and I think they're really appreciative of it. But they have really stepped up here in the last couple of weeks on preparing for the meter changes. We've bought a bunch of material to try to prep some of these troublesome areas. We know that meters are deep or buried or hard to get to, and they've been busting their tails going around. They've all split up. They go to different parts of town. They're kind of prepping the boxes and getting everything ready, so it is a smoother transition. But I really appreciate all the hard work they've put in over the last couple of months. It's really showing and paying off. But some of the things that we've changed since I've gotten here, we kind of did a little safety overhaul with the department. Got everybody some best hard hats, strobes, extra cones, just all your normal construction site equipment. They've taken onto that really good. All the vests are mandatory. Once you leave the parking lot in the morning, vests are on. Construction areas, if heavy equipment's going on, everybody's got hard hats. Job sites are set up safe. We've been notifying fire and police if need be. If a road's going to be closed, that way they know that road's not going to be accessible, find a different route. If we've got it closed down, been notifying customers, trying to have better communication. If we are going to have water shut off. And we've done a good job about relaying that information and having pretty close timetables as far as how long the water is going to be off. Haven't had any issues with that. We have purchased some new lighting for night work. I've got some more lighting coming to change out on the excavation equipment. Noticed one of the first night jobs we did here, it was really bad lighting, which just makes the whole job dangerous. So we've got some LED upgrades coming on the equipment. I've already got in place some LED spotlights for the job sites. On our meter reading, I know you guys know this is one of our upgrades we're doing, but in order to kind of help with that, one thing that I brought from my previous employer was just meter reading tools. There's a local metal fabricator in town, and I went to him and I had actual meter hooks made, some meter wrenches, kind of eliminates pipe wrenches and tools that are not specifically designed for the nuts and the hardware on the equipment. So your material in the ground lasts longer. It's not chewing up the cutoff or the meter nuts as bad as pipe wrenches, adjustable wrenches, screwdrivers, things like that. So got all that in house already. We've been using it. It's really helped out on our efficiency as far as reading meters the old fashioned way. Just these tools have helped. Kind of another safety point I've got up here is, during the shutdown, where not everybody was on site every day when we kind of closed down for the virus, had my guys doing online safety training, and everybody's got about 10 hours of safety related, job related training already this year. Let's see here. On the customer service side, we've added some of our forms and our contracts to the website to make that easier for customers. People moving in for the first time that need to sign up for new accounts. ACH forms, all that stuff is now available on our website. You can print that out and email that straight back to us. That really helped out during this time because nobody's able to come to town hall to physically pick up forms. So that's been a big help. Let's see. One of our biggest things we changed was we've moved to an online work order management system. The main reasoning behind that was obviously a lot of our employees are retirement age in the water department. And so that's going to be a lot of knowledge that we're going to be losing. So one of the benefits of the work order management system is going to be with the work orders that we create, whether it's fixing leaks, whether it's customers have called in on complaints of how excavations were left, how yards were left, any of that, the system allows you to add documents, pictures to each work order. So what we've started doing is the guys take pictures when they show up, midway through the excavation, before you fill in the hole. So we know what the pipe looks like, what material was used, what the repair looks like before they cover it up. I've got them getting kind of a reference in the background, whether it be a mailbox, a street sign, so you can kind of tell where you're at in the picture. And then at the end, what the yard looks like. So it's been a real benefit already, just kind of creating some history files on the system. And like I said, to that point, if you have a customer call in 6 months later complaining about the way the yard was left, we can have pictures of this is how we left it, not to call anybody liars, but this is how we left it. Yes, you're right. Or that must have been some other incident that happened.
All right.
Let's see here. Other than that, we've got some upgraded equipment. We've got the new backhoe in, got the new dump truck in. We're moving forward with some SCADA upgrades. They're going to come in the next couple months since our new budget year started. A lot more stuff will be online for us. It's not going to require so much manual input from employees. We'll be able to change pumps, monitor pumps, pressures, flows. We'll be able to do all that from the computer. We're moving along, and like I said, the employees are doing a fantastic job moving forward.
Well, Adam, thank you. I think you've set the bar very high for other department heads to come in and give reports.
Well, I like to hear.
They should probably watch what you did and then go, oh no, they really want to know a lot of stuff. So council, I think that's really useful. Do you folks agree? So look forward to it. And
yeah, and as we get some meters in the ground, be more than happy to give updates whenever you like.
All right, appreciate it. Yeah, just keep us updated. Everybody's going to be talking about it once it starts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to add, and Adam did a good job of covering all of that, but in the midst of all of that, again, it's amazing how busy he is and how much he gets done. And in the middle of all of that, I don't know if all of you were familiar with Shirley, the clerk. She resigned and went back to a former employer. So in the middle of that, he's also hired a new water clerk. How many did you end up?
We had 70 applicants, interviewed think I interviewed about 15.
Yeah. So just one other thing on
Well, I will say, because we just moved, changed neighborhoods a little bit. I had some business with the water department, and the people dealing with me did not know I was the mayor or a council member, which is fine. And they were fantastic. They were
Good. Thank you.
super friendly and efficient, and it was a pleasant experience. And it was only as we got near the end, somebody said, "That's the mayor," which was great. That's how it ought to work.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Adam. We'll
Yes, sir. Thank
move
you.
on to the next item, which is the manager's report. And Sam, it shows that Eric's still waiting. Have you let him know that?
He is aware, yes.
Okay. I could see why he'd want to sit around and watch us.
We've ultimately covered some of the stuff I have on here, but there are a few other things that I want to mention. Talked to Loretta today, and she is recommending and requesting that they go ahead and open the lobby at Public Works. Much lower volume of traffic there than, say, the town hall. And what they're seeing is that, as it has been, the building materials that are coming in continue to be far above what the normal levels have been. And we suspended charging for those, and they've looked at operations and feel that they can do it safely. And as much as we're having to have that pull, she really thinks it's advisable to get that revenue stream back in place. So unless there are any objections, we're going to give that a try. We'll continue to limit it to residents only as opposed to contractors, and see if that's a manageable process. But again, what we've done has been an attempt to safeguard our employees and provide the level of service possible for the residents. This really won't diminish that in any way, but it will allow us to reintroduce that fee and associated revenue stream that staff feels they can safely facilitate. LPRF grant project over Marion and Driver. I hate to end on two things that could be seen as bad news, but those bids came in and were significantly over anticipated costs. Engineers are reviewing that now, looking at the bid documents. Sam said it was really amazing that line item to line item, they were vastly different. But when you got to bottom line, they were only a few $1,000s apart. But they're gonna evaluate that, and we're already beginning the process of exploring options in terms of adjusting scale of the scope or anything like that. So we'll complete that process and then report back. At the last meeting, I indicated that we had just received information from MTAS on the stormwater fee study. That we've reviewed that and met it on it, and it was really kind of a scenario similar to what we did with the water. And we really looked at what we are going to need to accomplish in the next several years and provided that to MTAS for review. Even though at this point, you guys haven't had the opportunity to go over all of that yet. The projections, in-house projections, were basically borne out by MTAS, so that we could easily see a doubling of fees to cover the cost of all of that. So at this point, what I would like to do is be able to convey that preliminary information to you guys along with the MTS information, and would suggest that it might be something that we would want to dedicate a meeting to. Once you've had an opportunity to familiarize yourself with all of that. Timing wise, the fact that we just got it in, property tax billing and all of that, which is when it's billed is along with property tax. We're not going to get that out this year. So we're going to need to look at if there are any pressing issues. Ultimately, we could consider either just funding through general fund dollars or doing an interfund loan scenario where we could fund projects and then stormwater could ultimately reimburse the town. So those are some options we can look at if we get in a bind for projects that are demanding to be attended to. And that's all I have beyond what we've discussed earlier in the meeting.
All right, time for communications from, unless anybody's questions for Boyd. Time for communications from mayor and council. I'd like to ask that this sort of ties in with the tentative agenda for next time, as this stuff always does when we get to the ending. Could we have a push for applicants for any positions open, but not just saying what positions are open? Could town hall put together a description of the board and do an email blast? And I don't know if, I guess we can talk about it when we get to tentative agenda. I don't know if that should maybe be on the next agenda. So we do some position filling, depending on, I think we have several positions that are open. So would that be okay for maybe Sherry pull that together, but not just say these positions are open, but this is the board. These are the kinds of things the board does. And maybe even, for the most part, when I tell people that there are positions open, they say, well, what do they do? And one of the best ways of knowing what they do is to look what they've done. And we have some that haven't met in a while even. So
we have a synopsis for each of the boards, so we can compile that and note associated openings with each.
You feel those are accurate and current and reflect what the boards think they do?
Well, I would certainly address that before we send it out.
Okay.
We'll review them, and we have a starting point in place for that. Is what I'm getting at.
If you did review it and found out they might need to be, looked at, maybe that's something that could come back to the council, since the boards serve the council, basically.
If you want us to do that ahead of sending it out, we can do that.
Anybody have any thoughts on that? That's not where I started with this, but no thoughts? We're thoughtless. You guys like a 2.5 hour meeting? No, not so much. So I guess the only other thing that I'd add is we have the 20th, I believe, is the deadline for anyone who wants to run for council. We have 3 positions coming open, and you can't wait till the 20th. You need to, if you're considering it, you need to go to the election commission and pick up your papers. Then you have to get signatures. Cheryl, you've put your name in, haven't you? And it's how many signatures?
You need 25 ballots, so they suggest that you get quite a few more than that in case someone forgets where they live.
Yeah, and they have to verify those. So anybody who's interested, we need some more folks. This is fun. What would you rather be doing on a Monday afternoon? All right. Anybody else have anything you want to add? Any new thing to add to tentative agenda at this point? I don't think we added anything in the course of this meeting, did we, Carol?
We pushed the codes issues to the next meeting.
Right.
Okay. All right. Anyone, I think we're ready for adjournment. Anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Does that sigh a second,
That
Cheryl?
was a second.
All right, we don't have to vote on this. We are adjourned.
We
Good
are-
evening, everybody. Thank you.